cold Tokyo night air cut through my skin as I walked through the narrow streets of the Zashigaya neighborhood. The city lights seemed distant here, as if this place were trapped in a time bubble, oblivious to the progress of the outside world. My heart raced, a mix of excitement and apprehension consuming me. I was Akira Tanaka, a young journalist in search of a story that could launch my career. And here I was, about to spend the night in the infamous Zashigaya Kishimogen Temple. The stories about this place had haunted me since childhood. My grandmother used to tell tales of lost souls wandering the temple corridors, their voices echoing on moonless nights. I always dismissed these stories as the superstitions of an old woman. But now, standing before the imposing red gates of the temple, I felt a shiver run down my spine. The night watchman, an old man with a wrinkled face and tired eyes, greeted me with a disapproving look. "Young man," he said, his hoarse voice cutting through the night silence. "Are you sure you want to do this? Many have entered, but few have left the same." I swallowed hard, but maintained my determination. "Yes, sir. It's for an important article." He shook his head, murmuring something inaudible as he opened the gates. The creaking of the metal echoed through the night, like a final warning. I stepped inside, and the sound of the gates closing behind me felt like a sentence. The temple courtyard was lit by paper lanterns that swayed gently in the night breeze. Their flickering lights cast dancing shadows on the ancient walls, as if spectral figures were watching me. The smell of incense hung in the air, mingling with the damp odor of old wood and wet earth. I walked slowly toward the main building, my footsteps echoing in the sepulchral silence. The floorboards creaked under my feet, as if the temple itself was protesting my presence. With each step, I felt as though I was venturing deeper into a world that didn't belong to me. Upon entering the main hall, I was greeted by an almost palpable darkness. The faint light from the lanterns barely penetrated here, creating a play of light and shadow that let my imagination run wild. Statues of deities stared at me from the shadows, their eyes seeming to follow my every move. I decided to begin my investigation. I pulled out my recorder and began to speak. It's 10:37 p.m. I'm in the main hall of the Zashigaya Kishimogen Temple. The atmosphere is oppressive. There's a feeling of... I stopped abruptly. A soft sound, almost imperceptible, reached my ears. It sounded like a whisper, incomprehensible words murmured in the distance. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling slightly. "Is anyone there?" Silence. Only the wind blowing outside, making the lanterns sway. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, fueled by the stories I had researched. I took a deep breath and continued my exploration. The hours dragged on. Every corner of the temple held a new surprise, a new shadow that seemed to move at the edge of my vision. The air grew heavier with each passing minute, as if the very oxygen was laden with ancient secrets. It was around 2 a.m. when things really started to get strange. I was on the second floor, examining a series of old paintings when I heard it. A low, almost inaudible cry, coming from somewhere nearby. My heart raced. "Hello!" I called again, my voice echoing through the empty corridors. The crying stopped abruptly, replaced by a deafening silence. And then footsteps, slow, dragging, coming toward me. I froze in place, unable to move. A figure emerged from the shadows at the end of the corridor. It was a woman, or at least it appeared to be. She wore a traditional white kimono, her long black hair covering her face. My mind screamed at me to run, but my feet seemed glued to the floor. The figure slowly approached, her movements erratic, almost as if she were floating. When she was just a few meters from me, she stopped. Slowly, she lifted her head. The scream caught in my throat. Where there should have been a face, there was only a black void, as if all light was being sucked into it. And then she spoke. Her voice was like 1,000 whispers at once, echoing not only in the corridor but inside my own mind. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "This is not a place for the living." At that moment, my legs finally obeyed. I ran. I ran like I had never run before, down the stairs, through the main hall. Behind me, I could hear the whispers multiplying, as if hundreds of voices were calling me back. I reached the courtyard, my lungs burning, my heart threatening to burst from my chest. The paper lanterns now looked like burning eyes watching me, their flames dancing frantically. I ran toward the gates, praying they were unlocked. They were. I pushed them open with all the strength I had left and burst onto the street. Only then did I allow myself to look back. The temple stood there, silent and imposing as ever. There was no sign of the woman in white or the whispers that had pursued me. The night watchman found me there, panting and trembling. His look was no longer one of disapproval, but of understanding and perhaps a bit of pity. "You saw, didn't you?" he asked softly. All I could do was nod. "They always come back," he murmured, more to himself than to me. "The temple calls them back." In the days that followed, I tried to rationalize what had happened. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was my overactive imagination fueled by all the stories I had researched. But on quiet nights, when the wind blew and the shadows danced in my room, I could swear I heard those whispers again. My article was never written. How could I put into words what I had experienced? Who would believe it? But the Zashigaya Kishimogen temple had left its mark on me. I knew that, in some way, a part of me had stayed there that night. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can see those lanterns swaying in the darkness, calling me back. Weeks passed, and I tried to move on with my life. But the memories of that night at the temple haunted me constantly. I began having recurring nightmares where I found myself running through endless corridors, pursued by whispers and shadows. I would wake up in a cold sweat, the echo of those voices still ringing in my ears. My work began to suffer. I couldn't focus on other stories. My thoughts always drifted back to Zashigaya. My colleagues noticed the change, asking if I was okay. But how could I explain? How could I say that I had seen something that defied all logic and reason? It was on a rainy autumn afternoon that I received the call. It was the temple's night watchman. His voice trembled over the phone. "Mr. Tanaka," he said, "you need to come back. There's something you need to see." Every fiber of my being screamed at me to refuse, to hang up the phone and never think of that place again. But a part of me, a part one no longer recognized, yearned for answers. Before I knew it, I was once again standing before the red gates of Zashigaya Kishimogen. The watchman was waiting for me, his face more aged than I remembered. Without a word, he led me inside the temple. The rain fell softly, creating an ethereal mist around the lanterns. The smell of wet earth and incense was even stronger now. We reached the main hall, and that's when I saw it. On the wall, where there had been only old wood before, there was now a painting. My blood ran cold. It was me, a perfect representation of me, running through the temple's corridors, terror etched on my face. And behind me, the figure in white, her face a black void. This appeared last night," the watchman murmured. "I've never seen anything like it in all my years here." My mind reeled, trying to find a rational explanation. But I knew, deep in my heart, that I had crossed a line from which there was no return. The temple had marked me, had chosen me. In the days that followed, I plunged into frantic research. I scoured old archives, interviewed local historians, and sought any information that could shed light on the mystery of Zashigaya. What I discovered left me even more disturbed. I learned that the temple was built over an ancient cemetery. Legend spoke of a ritual performed centuries ago, a ritual that supposedly opened a portal between the world of the living and the dead. The souls trapped there, the accounts said, were constantly seeking an escape, a body to inhabit. I began to notice subtle changes in myself. Sometimes, I found myself muttering words in a language I didn't know. My reflection in the mirror seemed different, as if someone else was staring back at me. One night, unable to take it anymore, I returned to the temple. The full moon hung in the sky, bathing everything in a pale, ghostly light. The lanterns danced in the night breeze, their flames seeming more alive than ever. I entered the main hall, and there she was, the woman in white. This time I didn't run. Something inside me knew this encounter was inevitable. "Why me?" I asked, my voice echoing in the empty hall. She approached, her movements fluid like water. When she spoke, her voice was a chorus of whispers. You heard us. You saw us. Now you are part of us. I felt a force pulling at me, as if my very essence was being ripped from my body. I fought against it, clinging to every fragment of my identity. But it was like trying to hold water in my hands. In a moment of clarity, I realized what was happening. The temple wasn't just a place. It was a living entity, hungry, and I was its next meal. With one final effort of will, I tore myself from that spectral embrace. I ran out of the temple, my mind a whirlwind of voices and images. But I knew it was too late. A part of me had stayed behind, trapped forever within the ancient walls of Zashigaya. Now, as I write these words, I feel my time running out. The temple calls to me, its voice a constant whisper in the recesses of my mind. I know that soon, very soon, I will return there. And this time, there will be no return. To whoever finds this account, I beg you, stay away from the Zashigaya Kishimojin Temple. Don't let your curiosity lead you there. For in the dancing shadows of the lanterns, in the voices that echo in the empty corridors, there is a horror that defies comprehension. And remember, when the wind blows and you hear a distant whisper calling your name, don't answer. For it may not be the wind, but the trapped souls of Zashigaya, once again seeking to cross the boundary between worlds. My hand trembles as I write these last words. Night is falling outside, and with it comes that familiar sense of calling. I know this will be my last night as Akira Tanaka. Tomorrow, I will be just another shadow in the corridors of Zashigaya, another voice in the chorus of whispers that echoes through eternity. May the gods have mercy on my soul.